Howdy, my name is Vashthlos, and this is my guide for Eye of Winter Arcanist brand, cast on crit, brand recall, assassin. Before we begin, I would like to give credit where credit is due, and that's the 3 content creators. Jungrown was the first place that I'd seen someone's guide for Eye of Winter Arcanist brand. Surgeon General helped me obtain a deeper understanding of the build mechanics and other hurdles for Assassin Eye of Winter Arcanist brand. And Bozy the Duckman was where I learned I can gain some powerful defenses just for a couple of cheap unique items. I'm going to leave the respective videos from those content creators down below in the comments. I hope you'll check them out. They are titans of Rayclast, giants whose shoulders that you can certainly stand on. Other than the credits, I would like to bring you guys through a little bit of a journey as to how this character began. Right now we are an Eye of Winter Arcanist brand cast on crit brand recall assassin. That is absolutely not what we started out as. If you know my character's name, it's Vashthlos _ Mechawarp. Mechawarp is supposed to be a little bit of a portmanteau, I guess, which is Mecha, supposed to be traps, warp, lightning warp. I was going to be a lightning warp trap saboteur, and that really did not pan out as well as I thought it was going to be. We were planning on using like a bronze lith, and planning on the increased area of effect being enough to make lightning warp as traps feel good, because you don't need cast speed as a trapper. I'm not really sure if I gave it as much of a try as it deserved, but we did plan on it being a meme and didn't want to take it too seriously if it gave us any pushback. Since lightning warp traps weren't really working out, we started messing around with other spells. The other spell that we first landed on was Firestorm, and Firestorm, I've got to say, it felt amazing. I may consider this as an actual league starter with trap support. You just delete bosses with a little bit of crit multiplier, and it's just very, very smooth. You can preload all the damage. I didn't really ever have that many of mana problems. I could take a couple of damage auras on top of my defensive auras. But eventually we learned some unfortunate information that was mainly a result of my inability to read. That is that Firestorm is not a projectile. I don't know if you knew, but Firestorm is not a projectile, and it blew my mind. I mean, come on though, it looks like a projectile. Like, just look at the thing. That's totally a projectile. Anyways, I scrapped my idea for Firestorm because it didn't feel like it was doing exactly what I wanted, which had to do with my item choices as well. I'll get on to that a little bit later as to why that choice makes sense in the gear section. But we swapped over to Eye of Winter at this point, after realizing that Firestorm was not a projectile skill. Eye of Winter is. For a while we were down by piercing shots, so that we could get additional pierce chance and the suppression that we needed. We thought that maybe the critical strike multiplier down there was also what we wanted. And I wasn't fully understanding what made Eye of Winter Arcanist brand so good, because we were clearing maps no problem, but my boss damage was absolutely like horrendous as Eye of Winter Trapper, because the projectiles were just going like all over the place. Even with Anemus, there was like no limit to how far the projectiles could go, so just completely going off the map and hitting walls and dissipating. And then we started using Eye of Winter Arcanist brand, and it just like clicked as to why it was so good. It was obvious that the range limitation is just otherworldly powerful with Eye of Winter, and from there it was smooth as butter. We had already had all the items we really cared about using as the cornerstones of everything, and from there it was just crafting some really expensive items. We will now get into some of the pros and cons. Starting with the pros, this is absurdly tanky for an assassin. I can't stress that enough. This is easily one of the tankiest characters I've ever made. The leveling is very smooth as a saboteur. If you heard me earlier, I said I leveled as Firestorm Trap Support. I annihilated the campaign. I don't know what leveling an assassin as this build would be like. I'm not sure I can recommend it, so keep that as food for thought. You can swap as soon as you have the necessary unique items, most notably Nemus. The others I'm going to go over in the gear section. Spell suppression cap is extremely easy, as you have a lot of options to choose from, ranging from basically every gear piece that isn't your boots, as well as nearby passive points that you don't necessarily need, but if you find yourself in a pinch, you can absolutely take them very comfortably. In-game, you will have 75-75 block, if you've built the way I've built. Permanent elusive, that negates extra critical strike damage taken. We have built-in culling strike with our critical strikes. Our damage is amazing, and so is our map clear. As for the cons, you are so tanky that you will probably feel tempted to test how tanky you actually are, constantly. You're going to see stuff go on the ground and you're going to be like, I want to stand in that. That looks like it could explode. Will it kill me? And you're just going to be in that washing cycle. If you slap on a fork support, my computer is sent to the Shadow Realm near Harbinger monsters, or really any really large tanky pack. Sometimes it happens without fork support, but it's especially funny with fork support. It's really expensive, and some items have limited availability. This could wildly affect the price. We are very thirsty, and we need copious amounts of energy shield to satisfy the unholy amounts of spells that we are spewing out like a fire hose. Now that we've gotten the introduction out of the way, and we've talked about some of the pros and cons, I'd like to start discussing some of the skills within the build. First and foremost, that would be our main damage skill, Eye of Winter. But you want the anomalous version. And the most important secondary support is Divergent Arcanist brand. Both of these alternate qualities provide us additional projectile speed, and it's extremely important that you have those. The other support gems are Awakened Elemental Focus support, Increased Critical Damage support, Awakened Cold Penetration support, and Awakened Added Cold Damage support. This is what Eye of Winter looks like without Arcanist brand or Nemus. This is what it looks like with Nemus. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like with Arcanist brand and Nemus. So it just spews them out and it limits the range of them. That's probably the most important tagline of Arcanist brand, besides having the Divergent version, is that if you see at the bottom, projectiles from supported skills have 4.8 meters maximum range, and that really lends itself to Nemus and Eye of Winter quite beautifully. The next skill we will talk about is actually two at the same time, and that would be Frenzy and Brand Recall, as we keep these in the same item. We keep them in our helmet, and they are supported with Cast on Critical Strike and Greater Multiple Projectiles. So Frenzy, Brand Recall, Cast on Critical Strike, and Greater Multiple Projectiles. Without Greater Multiple Projectiles, Nemus would cause Frenzy to be quite, painful, as it's just a complete random direction and you're only firing one projectile. So GMP makes it much more likely that you're going to hit something, and the uptime of 3 Frenzy charges becomes a laughing matter. Cast on Critical Strike triggers Brand Recall for us without having to do anything other than just press Frenzy every now and then. It may not be 100% trigger rate, but who cares? It's a quality of life that I think is quite valuable, and since we don't use a wand and shield setup like other brand recallers to trigger the trigger bots again, we're going to use Cast on Critical Strike to substitute. And as you can see, it works great. The next skill is very straightforward and is just a little bit of a damage steroid and kind of a little bit of a defensive layer. It's Vortex. As you can see, I'm just walking around and dropping them. I'd recommend put this on your left click or whatever button you use to move. And the only support we're going to attach to it is Bone Chill. The reason why is that Vortex has a chilling area it leaves behind, and you can have a couple of them. I think it's like 3 or something. And anything that gets in that chilling area is going to have their cold damage taken increased by that very same chill effect applied to them. On tankier monsters, it's probably going to be around 15% or a little bit lower. I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but just be aware that that number will go down the tankier the monster is. And it's nice. Who doesn't love having their monsters take increased damage? It's just passive. You don't really have to think about it. They're going to step in the zones no matter what eventually. So very nice tech. Next, we are going to talk about our mark. We use Sniper's Mark, and the reason why is that it increases our marked target's damage taken from projectile hits by a substantial amount. And it also causes those projectiles to split towards additional targets, if any so happen to be nearby. This is what a normal amount of projectiles looks like from our frenzy with GMP. Then we will mark our target, and we'll start to see some more fly out. And then we will use some brands, and then a whole lot more projectiles will happen because of that. Last but not least, before we get into the auras, are our movement skills. First would be Flame Dash. It's really nice, gives you 3 charges, what's not to like. And then to circumvent the cooldown, we use Blink Arrow. So we have 2 movement abilities. And I think I first started doing this because I was following like some Zizzarin builds. And 2 movement abilities is just, you know, chef's kiss. It really feels nice. Especially when you've got them on like alternate gym types or something like that. Because if you were to use Flame Dash and then Frost Blink would put one of the charges from Flame Dash away, and then Flame Dash would put Frost Blink on cooldown. So this works around that. It's pretty nice. Okay, let's talk about auras. We will talk about active auras first, such as auras that we have to press a button in order to receive the benefit from them. And it's only 2. The first would be Hatred, and then the other is Vol Haste. Vol Haste is self-explanatory, but Hatred we support with Divine Blessing. Divine Blessing lets us benefit from our Eldritch Battery quite handsomely, which turns our energy shield into a resource for mana. And once I press Hatred, it gives me the aura for 11 seconds, basically. Extremely powerful. It barely costs us any energy shield. It says 333. It sounds like a lot. It's not. We regenerate that amount of energy shield near instantly. Vol Haste is not a guarantee, but it'll be up every now and then, so get yourself a Vol Haste, and you will certainly appreciate all of that additional cast speed when it's available. As for our passive auras, we use 5. Haste, Discipline, Determination, Zealotry, and Aspect of the Spider. I would say Haste, Determination, and Zealotry are non-negotiable, whereas Discipline is going to come into play once you get yourself perfect crime and your skitterbots. And then Aspect of the Spider is pure luxury. So if I had to say in terms of priority, probably Determination, Haste, Zealotry, Discipline, Aspect of the Spider. Other than that, I use a cast when damage taken support and pair it with Molten Shell. Shocker, I know. We have armor and we want to use it. And this is a beautiful defensive layer that we can throw in for only two gem sockets. Be sure to balance the relationship between Molten Shell, cast when damage taken support, and the amount of life you have. Mine is a little underleveled right now. I could probably stand to raise it a bit. My recommendation would be to have cast when damage taken support activate when you lose like 60 to 70% of your maximum life. I don't know what that is for you. Everyone's gear is different. Play it by ear. And make sure that Molten Shell can still be supported by whatever level you have cast when damage taken support at. I had to re-level mine like at least 10 times because I kept forgetting to stop leveling it. Okie doke. Let's talk about the passive tree, and I'll try and be quick about it, as there's probably a lot to talk about. I do not have multiple trees for you this time. Reason being is that this is not a leveling guide. This is my in-game character imported. As you heard earlier in the introduction, I've had many variations of what I had planned to do with this character. At first it was going to be a meme. At other times I thought it was going to be a new test for a league starter. And then we eventually landed on a super duper expensive assassin. So Extrapolate all the information that you can. Maybe you'll learn something from the choices I've made here. And let's get going. We path all the way down past Blood Siphon. First we get Trickery, Blood Siphon, Coordination, and we pick up that Jewel Socket for Storm Shroud so that we can gain Elemental Ailment Immunity. Next we move past Reflexes for Mage Bane. Profane Chemistry will come much later, but be aware that that's some convenient life for you. Tolerance gives you free Chaos Resistance, and then an ability to gain Corrupted Blood immunity for free. For your Timeless Jewel, you are going to use a Militant Faith converted by High Templar Avarius. Avarius turns Pain Attunement right here into Power of Purpose. Power of Purpose transforms 80% of your maximum mana to twice that much armor. It's very nice. And then Nimbleness is an important cluster so that you can pick up 6% increased cast speed for each different non-instant spell you've cast recently. That stacks up really quickly. It's really powerful. Honored Tattoo of the Berserker is an important one. You pick it up right here. It gives you Onslaught for 4 seconds on hit. We love cast speed. Light Eater is a linchpin of the build. You need Energy Shield Leech when paired with Eldritch Battery and how hungry Arcanist brand Eye of Winter is. So you also pick up the 10% of Leech's instant. Pick up Influence for reservation efficiency and increased effect of non-curse auras. You need the strength from Written in Blood, and I'll go ahead and say that I think Jungrown normally will path and just pick up this whole cluster of life and energy shield, and then he'll also pick up Leth Shade along with Snowforged because he's more focused on lowering resistances than what I'm doing, which is inverting them. So I chose to go over here with Stormweaver as I did not want to lower my target's resistances for those hits that do happen to invert, which is happening far more often than you may think. Let's talk about the Cluster Jewel wheel real quick. The only real node that you care about is Doriani's Lesson. Everything else is just there to force Doriani's to the bottom. And for your medium Cluster Jewels, you get a 4 or 5 passive one, you're good to go, and both of them need to have Aerodynamics and Streamlined. Both of those grant you projectile speed, which is so desperately needed for us. For those jewel sockets on the medium Cluster Jewels, put in Forbidden Flame and Flesh that grants Perfect Crime. Trigger bots are exceptionally powerful with this build. They also inflict a massive mana multiplier on us, but that's okay. We solved that with Discipline, like I said earlier. Make your way past Heart and Soul, pick up Practical Application for the resistances, Strength and Dexterity extremely important, as well as chance to ignore stuns while casting is actually a pretty nice quality of life since we're almost constantly casting. Frostwalker, cast speed, resistance, cold damage, we love it. As for a Watcher's Eye when moving past this Mind Over Matter, I'm not really sure what the best thing to do is. It's probably a Zealotry one. Increased effective Consecrated Ground, or it like lingers on you, or Critical Strike, penetrate elemental resistances, or cast speed while affected by Zealotry. All three are lovely options. There's probably other options too. It's just this is the one that I bought. It was pretty cheap. Mind Over Matter. This allows us to benefit defensively from the energy shield that we lose towards a mana resource. So very powerful, but also can get you in some trouble if you get surrounded. So just be aware of that. It can happen. Runebinder effectively doubles your damage on a single target scenario. You can't argue this. You have to take it. You're a brand user. And as a result, you also take Runesmith, and you need a couple more brands to help you keep moving through maps. So you can cast 2 additional brands. From there, you pick up as much life as you can, and some additional reservation efficiency. For tattoos, we don't have too many choices. Get yourself an Ancestral Tattoo of the Bloodlines so that the increased recovery rate of life, mana, and energy shield is doubled up for each different type of tattoo that you have. I chose to go with Honored Tattoos of the Turtle for increased global defenses. Again, probably not the best choice, but the other ones than that were Chaos Resistance to help cap my Chaos Resistance for what I was lacking. And I think this last one up here for increased energy shield recharge rate. And the rest are global defenses. Now then, let's go ahead and talk about gear. The majority of changes that I've made to other people's variations reside within this section. And I'll, try and explain why I make those changes. Or at least why I've chosen the individual items. Here we go. As you can see, I use a Widowhail and a Rearguard. This has been taken from the Toe to Cheese build. this season, and the reason why is that Rearguard is an exceptionally powerful quiver when paired with Widowhail, and it's got a lot of stats that Eye of Winter would love to have. So with those two things working together, it's basically a why not scenario. Just to go through them: chance to block attack damage, chance to block spell damage, projectile speed, armor, stun and block recovery, and projectile damage. We love all of those, and we can even corrupt it with an implicit for chance to suppress spell damage. Let me inform you as to how some of the math works for Widowhail. That's 250% increased bonuses gained from equipped quiver. The way that works is the number you see times 2.5 plus the number you have, right? So that's, if it's projectile speed, I have 28%, 28 times 2.5 plus 28. But for math's sake, let's say it's 30%. 30 times 2.5 is 75. 75 plus 30 is 105% projectile speed. That is a ton. And with the suppression, even at this imperfect roll, that's 35% chance to suppress spell damage. That is insane. Once I realized how powerful this was, there was no chance in hell I'm using anything other than a bow and quiver for Eye of Winter. To round out our chance to suppress, or sorry, not chance to suppress spell damage, but to block spell damage, we use Rainbow Stride for an additional 20%. And then that leaves us at 65%. You can finish that either on your chest piece with 10% chance to block spell damage, or you can use a Stone of Lazwar, which has a baseline of 10% chance to block spell damage. But you may, have to solve resistances due to using a unique amulet. Our ring, mine turn. I crafted it myself, bought a fractured chaos base, and started slamming strength essences on there until we saw cold resistance. We locked in the suffixes, Vald Chaos Orb. Vald Chaos Orb hit life and mana regeneration. Once we got that, we crafted on non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana cost, and slammed it with an Exalted Orb, and we got evasion rating. On to the next craft. It was Rune Snare, and it was pretty similar. I slammed it with essences that guaranteed chance to avoid being shocked until we saw some high tier resistances. Luckily, we needed fire and cold, but if we were to have gotten, lightning or something else, we could have been able to change it with the Horde crafting station. I'm digressing a little bit. We lock in those suffixes, right? And then we slam it with a Hunter's Exalted Orb. We don't get the modifier that we want, which is the gain of flash charge when you deal a critical strike. Life would have also been nice. I probably would have settled for life. But anyways, we lock in suffixes again, right? And we go over towards the Horde crafting station, and we reforge critical strike. And that guarantees gain of flash charge when you deal a critical strike as that prefix. From there, we get Azling in research and slam on a Vald modifier, and luckily it takes away the suffixes cannot be changed modifier instead of the other prefix. But if something bad were to happen, we just lock in those suffixes again and rinse repeat because it's a guaranteed modifier. It just takes a lot of time. And then we craft on 17% increased damage, catalyst it the way you want, and Viper nails. These are my gloves. Very cheap and easy to make. I've had them for quite a long time, and they've even been through the other variations of what I thought this character was going to be. Craft it with some resistance essences until you see another resistance pop up that you need. You obviously need spell suppression as a fractured modifier. You want life, you want evasion rating or armor or whatever type of base you have. And then you craft on projectiles pierce an additional target and +1 to level of socketed projectile gems. Nemus is self-explanatory, but I'll beat you over the head with it anyways. Projectiles return to you. That's super powerful. Our projectiles have limited range because of Arcanist brand. You can't do this build without Nemus. Don't try this build without Nemus. Our chest piece. We use a Grasping Mail. Jungrown uses a Lore Weave and an Eternal Damnation, but because we want All's Uprising to help with our reservation, we chose to use a Grasping Mail. We also need that spell block damage. Right, there's like a couple of things we do differently. It's not that what Jungrown did is bad. Like, by no means. It's probably way better. Let me stress that. It's probably way better to just do a Lore Weave and Eternal Damnation so that you can reduce that elemental damage you take by half of your chaos resistance. But this way, we cap our spell block damage. We gain global defenses. We cap our spell suppression a lot easier. We can gain physical damage taken from hits as fire and lightning as a powerful modifier. And if you want to know how I craft this one, it's slam essences for reservation efficiency until you see either suppression or a high chaos resistance. Slam on your aspect of your choice. It can be spider, it can be Cracian, it can be Ferrule, whatever you want. And after that, you lock in suffixes, Vault Chaos Orb until you see block spell damage, and you craft on as the final prefix physical damage taken as fire and lightning. And the reason why you want it this way instead of having life on there is so that you can look at your passive tree and put in 15% increased maximum life if there are no life modifiers on your equipped body armor. So yeah, that's what I do with my chest piece. And for the implicits, I would recommend 1% to all maximum resistances. If you can Orb of Conflict that up to 2%, very nice. You've got yourself a sick implicit. And for the Eater of Worlds implicit, I think it is, the increased R effect ones, just go for Zealotry or another one that benefits you. Anything that benefits you. There's a couple of good choices. For our helmet, we use Morbid Visage, and I crafted this one as well. It's not really anything that special. It's just got some resistances on it. We lock in suffixes. We Vault Chaos Orb. We get life and mana regeneration per second. Craft on physical damage taken as fire. Slam it with an Exalted Orb, and unfortunately it hits tier 1 rarity of items found. I wish it would have been any other tier 1. But the implicits, not sure if they're the best ones. They sound like they work, right? Critical Strike, and then damage penetrates 4% of cold resistance. Make sure you get the enchant, as it's extremely important if you plan on changing out faster projectiles for increased critical strike damage. And that would be 30% increased Eye of Winter projectile speed. I think I already talked about All's Uprising, but just to be sure, All's Uprising. It needs to be Zealotry or another 50% aura. If you don't choose Zealotry, then you are probably not going to gain the intelligence or the increased chance for critical strikes to occur against enemies that you hit nearby. And long shot. I think that covers it. Anyways, for flasks, get yourself a instant recovery corrupted blood immunity flask. You need a diamond flask. I don't care what modifiers you have on any of your other flasks. Just make sure you have a diamond flask that gives reduced mana cost of skills during effect. That's it. The prefix can be anything different, but that suffix, it's got to be on the diamond flask because that's the mandatory flask. These other flasks, I don't care about. It's, okay, right? It's got spell damage leached as energy shield, and then it gives me increased damage. Dying Sun sounds fun because I shoot projectiles. I want to see more projectiles. I don't know if those are good choices, but that's what I chose. Final one is Quicksilver, obviously, as movement speed is a defensive layer. Here we are going to go over the notes section within the Path of Building. In case you don't have Path of Building, I'll read through it for you now. Projectile speed. You need a lot of projectile speed after obtaining the building block unique items that I've discussed prior in this video. Use faster projectile support instead of increased critical strike damage support until you anoint your necklace with Longshot and grab a helmet with 30% increased Eye of Winter projectile speed. I really cannot stress this enough. I do not want to hear about people saying that I don't have enough projectile speed, they're not returning to me all, and it's like, well, it's because you don't have all the makins. Anyways, bandits, kill all of them. You need those passive points. Ascendancy, Mistwalker, Unstable Infusion, Deadly Infusion, and Ambush and Assassinate. This is what that looks like. Boom, 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 boom. See? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. For your Pantheon gods, I've divided it into before Storm Shroud and after Storm Shroud. Brine King so that you can have that freeze immunity before Storm Shroud, and then Lunaris so that you can gain the chance to avoid projectiles, physical damage reduction, movement speed. There's a lot of goodies with Lunaris, so I highly recommend that. For your minor gods, you're not really going to change these, but it's a matter of preference in my opinion. Ralakesh affects bleeds, and then Abarath makes it so that you're unaffected by Burning Ground, which I personally love. We just talked about Annoyance and the Helmet enchant. Cluster Jewels we've talked about in the passive tree section. Timeless Jewel we talked about in the passive tree section, but here at the bottom, I'll go ahead and note for you, vilsol.github.io/timeless -jewels/tree. You're probably not going to be able to type that out from me just reading it, but that is the website that I use to find my timeless jewels whenever I'm feeling particularly picky. There's a little brief explanation of Power of Purpose, just like I did earlier. Here are the alternate quality gems listed out for you. Divergent Arcanist Brand, Anomalous Eye of Winter, Awakened Elemental Focus, Awakened Cold Penetration, Awakened Added Cold Damage, and Vol Haste. Here's a list of the Labyrinth enchants that I went over in the gear section. I'm not going to do that again. Here are the mechanical interactions of the build and trigger bots. I am going to read through all of these, so buckle up. It's either going to be confusing or it's going to make perfect sense. No in between. Nemus, our ring, forces projectiles to return to the player. Arcanist Brand limits the range those projectiles can travel. High projectile speed makes it so Eye of Winter returns fast enough to go through the intended target. Sniper's Mark is our curse skill. It causes the target to split projectiles toward additional targets and take additional damage from projectiles. Vortex and Bone Chill support are an easy and reliable source of increased damage for us. Vortex will explode into a chilling area, increasing monsters' damage taken by how large the chill effect on them is. That's like, active skill interactions. Here are trigger bots. Trigger bots are usually only available as a saboteur. We obtain them from our Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewel combination. These little guys completely change our build by 1. Your triggered spells trigger twice, once from each trigger bot's location. And 2. The additional trigger ignores cooldowns. This will require us to boost our Eldritch Battery with Discipline. Discipline as an aura will allow us to sustain the new titanic mana costs that this imposes upon us. The ignores cooldowns is also super important for brand recall, and we're going to describe that now in the TriggerBot skill interaction section. 1. Arcanist Brand. Every Eye of Winter our brands cast will also cast once from each TriggerBot's location. 2. Brand Recall. All brands return to your location, activating once from each TriggerBot's location, which causes all brands to return and activate once from each TriggerBot's location. Cast on Critical Strike support. Frenzy triggers Cast on Critical Strike once from each TriggerBot's location, which triggers Brand Recall once from each TriggerBot's location, which triggers all brands to return and activate once from each TriggerBot's location. There you go. Here are the defensive layers. There's quite a few. 75-75 block, 100% suppression, 150% guaranteed elusive and crit reduction, 70% or higher physical mitigation, cast when damage taken Molten Shell and Determination, Mind Over Matter and Eldritch Battery, 10% chance to avoid projectiles, 10% chance or higher to evade attacks due to having evasion on our gear, 20% physical damage taken as elemental due to the crafted prefixes that we've put on our chest and helmet, maximum chaos resistance, overcapped resistances in case we get cursed, 0.2% of elemental damage leached as life, and since we hit so often, that's a lot more life leech than it sounds like. Gain a gain a flash charge when you deal a critical strike, 5% chance to hinder on hit with spells, Storm Shroud elemental ailment immunity, 1 through 2% maximum all resistances, so that's chaos included. Effects of Consecrated Ground linger, which means that we do have some life regeneration occasionally, and maybe pretty high uptime because we're critting so often. And then 40% chance to avoid poison and bleeding. 18 defensive layers. We are tanky. And as of writing this guide, I've died 150 times. Alright. Yet again, we've got another build on our hands that what was supposed to be a meme, it started out as a meme, ends up not being a meme. The meme dies. We start taking it a little bit serious because we're having a bad time. It's like, okay, well, how am I going to get through the campaign if I can't do that right now when I want to? What if I try this? Or what if I try this? And oh, wow, that really works. Holy crap, I'm nuking stuff. Okay, we're going forward with this. And we're making iterations and changing things as they go. And that's kind of how it happens for me, I guess, is I just experiment and eventually something feels good and I want to see where I can take that. And the more I learn, the more I understand why other people are making certain decisions with their builds. And I was like, well, eventually I just want to try out an Eye of Winter build, so why not just do it right now if I'm already heading in that direction. I hope you had fun watching. I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you're willing to try some of the stuff that I talked about in this video with your Eye of Winter build, as you could be far tankier than you actually know with just a couple of changes.
Did you really think this would work?
Other than that, I'd say I'm a fan of Nemus. We got to get that Jungrown guy winning some more races, if you know what I mean, because I don't know if this is like a 65-45 or a 75-25 or a 50-50 kind of a situation in terms of participation, but bravo. This thing is visually stunning. It's a ton of fun as soon as you put it on. It packs a punch, and it probably doesn't even matter what main skill you attach to it. It doesn't have to be Eye of Winter. It's not the only projectile skill in the game. Really, really great job in designing this one. They should hire that guy. Anyways, as for another unique item that I think should not be slept on, it is Rainbow Stride. I don't know if either of these are really slept on. Of course, Nemus isn't slept on, but Rainbow Stride, there's a little potential that Rainbow Stride is slept on. 20% chance to block spell damage is incredibly powerful. All elemental resistances, everybody loves that. And 10% movement speed really isn't a lot to write home about in terms of what you're losing. Life, really not that much to write home about in terms of what you're gaining. You can also corrupt them for powerful implicits. I made a minion build with a corrupted pair that gave me +2 minion gems so that I could get my third Spectre off of a Guardian build. So they're not one-trick ponies. As long as you can block, you can probably push these things to the limit and they will reward you handsomely. Alright, I think that does it. Thanks for watching, and thank you, sincerely, thank you to Jungrown, Surgeon General, and Bozy the Duckman for the information that they provided during 3.22. This build would not have been possible without them, whether they know it or not. And thank you for tuning in for the whole thing. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you're going to experiment more freely with your next build. Maybe even a crackpot idea that you're going to change the meta with. But yeah, give me a like, give me a comment, subscribe for the next video. There will be more. And I will hopefully see you next time. Stay safe and Rayclast Exiles. Peace out.